When Brenda Landry met her fiancé, Jeff, well, let's just say it wasn't the first rodeo for either of them.
We are the epitome of a Tinder love story. I would say after the third or fourth time spending time together, we kind of locked it down pretty quick.
They were older, so they knew what they were looking for. But when you get together later in life, sometimes finding love is the easy part. Hi, I'm Paul Havershood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. More couples are now getting married in middle age, or even later. But merging your lives is one thing. Merging your finances? That's another. Also today, a big court ruling in the US has found that Donald Trump overstepped with tariffs. We look at whether this is maybe, kinda, a good thing for Canada. Up first, when was the last time you heard something from Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg? 10 minutes ago? Billionaires seem to be everywhere, and they're not always doing themselves any favors with the rest of us. Warren Buffett lives in a 5-bedroom house in Omaha. He drinks Coca-Cola, eats at the local steakhouse. Not that long ago, he was the world's richest person, and still kinda relatable. Other billionaires these days? Not so much. Like, here's Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, answering what seems like a straightforward question.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would.
Just say yes, bro. Now, billionaires have never been exactly like you and me, but they didn't always sound like cartoon supervillains. The number of billionaires in the last 15 years has tripled, and hardly a day goes by that we don't hear from one of them. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. They're talking about how AI will replace humans, or schmoozing Donald Trump at the White House, or planning to colonize space. 'Cause good luck on Earth, suckers! This is part of what's fueling a billionaire backlash. Everyone from New York's mayor to Teen Vogue are asking questions like, should anyone really have $1 billion? Here's Billie Eilish at an awards ceremony.
If you're a billionaire, why are you a billionaire? No hate, but yeah, give your money away, shorties. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
Eat the rich energy has been percolating for a while. But lately, it seems to have gone to a new level. Hollywood is now using tech bros as movie villains. They're not coming off great on TV shows like Succession. And the hoi polloi? They ain't happy with the billionaire shorties. They're asking philosophical questions like, how much money is too much? So I put this to Joe Heath. He's a philosopher at the University of Toronto and the author of Filthy Lucre, Economics for People Who Hate Capitalism.
Economists are caricatured often for answering every question by saying it depends. And maybe philosophers could be caricatured as answering every question by saying it's complicated.
Why so complicated? He says it's because the conversation around billionaires is about more than just money. It's wrapped up in questions of morality. Should anyone have extreme wealth when others live in extreme poverty? It's about economics. Who should pay what in taxes? It's also political. Are billionaires using their money to buy influence? All of that can be hard to untangle. What's more clear is what's happened to the amount of billionaire wealth. In 1995, Bill Gates, then the world's richest person, was worth $13 billion. Today, Elon Musk is worth $670 billion. This level of wealth is a new phenomenon, and much of it is because of Silicon Valley.
So a tech company, a successful tech company, is a license to print money on a scale that is like never before been like had an analog in human history.
Tech money is a new kind of wealth that's really only come about in the last 20 years or so. And it's left policymakers struggling with what to do about the wealth gap it's created. Some places, like California, are looking at wealth taxes. There's a line of thinking in Europe called limitarianism, which argues for a cap on extreme wealth. Joe Heath has watched the sheer scale of wealth go bonkers over this time, but that doesn't trouble him as much as how it was earned.
If it's being earned by exploiting loopholes or by engaging in activity that clearly should be illegal or whatever, right? Then that's a problem. But the problem is not that somebody got really wealthy; it's that somebody got really wealthy in this particular way, right? By taking advantage of somebody or someone somewhere.
Are we all on a level playing field, or have billionaires tipped things in their favor? That same question of fairness also extends to politics. The perception right now, at least in the US, is that billionaires are messing with democracy. Look at what just happened with the Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. It's a $6 billion project. It's nearly ready to open after years of construction, and it's something Donald Trump just threatened to block.
Literally because a billionaire owns the other bridge, and he called his billionaire friend in the Trump administration, and his billionaire friend then had a conversation with the billionaire president, and 3 billionaires colluded to generate a Truth Social tweet from Trump threatening to block this huge project.
If there are 2 sets of rules, one for billionaires and another for the rest of us, that'll make people who want to eat the rich even hungrier. Back in the late 19th century, during the Gilded Age, as it was called, the robber barons in the US had monopolies on railways and the oil industry. The gap between them and everyone else eventually became so big that governments stepped in. They broke up Standard Oil and eventually brought in personal income taxes to level the playing field. Today's billionaire class has been called the Gilded Age 2.0. There's speculation billionaires will again be reined in, but Joe thinks that won't be easy. When he looks at the nature of big tech, the source of so much wealth, he's not exactly sure what can be done.
It's hard to figure out how you create competition for a company like Facebook, for example. Like, the advantage of a social network is that all your friends are on the social network. So breaking it up into 5 social networks is just creating 4 that are going to die off and 1 that's going to become the social network. So in the older industrial age, where you had these cartels monopolizing oils and whatever, it was like really simple to understand what the bad was and then how to fix the bad.
Fixing the bad today, Joe says, will take understanding exactly what's wrong. And here's maybe some good news. Joe thinks what's happening in Canada is much different than what's going on in the US. A lot of our billionaire wealth comes from stuff like groceries and French fries. But it's not like Elon Musk money. And Joe says the way we do things here doesn't allow for the same kind of shenanigans.
Canada, has like a perfectly reasonable system of government that is robust and is not in danger of falling apart. And so in Canada, we have the power to regulate, and we do strictly regulate the influence of money in politics. And so the situation of billionaires in Canada and their power to corrupt democracy strikes me as being just a completely different conversation from the situation in the United States.
Of course, what billionaires do there still affects us, whether they're lobbying against our imports or running our social media companies. We see Elon Musk dancing around the White House while gleefully taking a chainsaw to federal jobs. That type of stuff doesn't make him, or any billionaires, many friends. Neither do the Epstein files. They show the ultra-rich behaving with seeming impunity. Combine all this with Silicon Valley wealth, Trump, and the importance of tech companies to the U.S. economy, and right now things seem to be coming to a head.
Apart from having a president who can simply be purchased, they also have a kind of impunity due to the fact that nobody wants to kill the goose that's laying the golden egg right now. So yeah, I guess their behavior is more brazen than we've come to expect from elites.
The people who advise the really wealthy have a saying: the whale that never surfaces doesn't get harpooned. Old money knew that. Flaunting your riches can draw attention you may not want. And now more governments are paying attention. Joe says if they really want to do something about billionaires, they need to get specific. Identify something that's unfair and try to fix it.
Crypto regulation, that's a conversation worth having. The question of how to create, competition in the tech sector is it's a really difficult question. And maybe if there was more competition, you wouldn't have people getting quite so rich in the tech sector. That's possible. But that would be its own little conversation. So every worthwhile conversation about these billionaires is a proxy for some other more detailed conversation.
If any Canadians are angry about extreme wealth, he thinks detailed conversations could start with understanding where the anger should be directed. Is it at Canadian billionaires, American billionaires, or somewhere else?
So people are upset about Musk and about Bezos and so on. But first and foremost, they're upset about the collapse of the U.S. into authoritarianism and the effects that that's having on Canada. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to be upset about. Blaming that on billionaires is to subscribe to a false theory of what happened in America. Blame should be assigned where blame is due.
Okay, so maybe we shouldn't eat the rich? Unless they're hoverboarding behind a yacht, then maybe just a few nibbles. This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. If you've listened to the show before, you know that at The Cost of Living, we love love. We love it in the springtime, and we love it when people find it in the autumn of their lives, which Leah Hendry says is happening more often, but can come with a few more strings attached.
Brenda Landry is outgoing. She loves meeting new people. So when she tried online dating in her 40s, she went on dozens of dates.
I didn't approach every date like, is this my next husband? I learned the fine art of catch and release, which is test things out, see who's actually for you.
After taking a few off the hook and throwing them back, she met her now fiancé, Jeff. And something just clicked.
We are the epitome of a Tinder love story. I would say after the third or fourth time spending time together, we kind of locked it down pretty quick.
They moved in together. And then, just before Christmas, they got engaged. They're both 51.
And I don't know if it's just a maturity thing, but I feel safe with him. He's settled down. I don't have to worry about what he's doing on boys' night.
Recent census data shows more couples in their 50s are getting married, often for the first time. But getting married in midlife, let's face it, it usually involves a lot more baggage, and some of that baggage has to do with money.
Yeah, money troubles can be an issue in a marriage, but if you think about them in advance, hopefully they don't need to be.
Krista Kerr is a financial advisor. She says it's important for couples to understand each other's approach to money. Like, how much do you want to save for retirement? Or how do you feel about carrying debt?
Is one of you very adverse to debt, doesn't want debt on anything, never wants to use a credit card, or at least pay it off immediately upon doing it, and the other person is very lax with using credit cards and debt? That should be brought up before it becomes an issue.
Generally, by the time people reach middle age, they're more established and they have more stuff, like a house. Krista says couples need to figure out how much of that they want to share and how much they want to keep to themselves.
So, it might seem like a small thing, sure, move into my house, but you have to, if you haven't done any other kind of prenuptial agreement or any other kind of protection, you've basically given half of that house to your partner. And that's fine if that's what you're wanting to do. You just need to be aware of that.
People also need to think about how they'll handle an inheritance, like that priceless stamp collection from Great Uncle Bob, or a pile of cash from your parents.
If I'm going to inherit some money, my parents spent a lot of time building that up. I'd like to keep that somehow between myself and my siblings. I think that can be an acceptable discussion, but you want to have that open discussion.
If there are significant assets, Krista recommends a prenuptial agreement. That way, it's clear what will be shared during the marriage and what will be split if things don't work out. Sure, conversations about money can be tough at first, but Brenda says she doesn't shy away from them. It's one of the advantages of getting older.
There is just a confidence about you that arrives. I think it starts to arrive in your, 40s for sure, but it really lands in your 50s, and it's kind of a no BS portion era of your life.
And with the financial details more or less worked out, Brenda says she and her fiancé can focus on their upcoming wedding.
And then there's nothing left to do but love.
For The Cost of Living, I'm Leah Hendry.
And we're back with a new installment of As the Tariffs Turn. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump overstepped his authority in his use of tariffs. He was using something called the Emergency Powers Act to justify, upending the global trading order. Now, the court said, you can't do that. So, is this a win for Canada? Well, there are a lot of ins to this, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous. Martina Stevis-Gridneff has been following all of them. She's the Canadian bureau chief for the New York Times. Martina, hi.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So before we get into all the fun details about international trade, is this a loss for the U.S. president?
Yes, it is a loss. It's a direct challenge to his authority. It is a flex by the Supreme Court, which has gone along with so much of his agenda so far. And we can tell it's a loss because he lashed out after the decision was delivered.
Well, let's talk about that lashing out. First of all, how did Trump react to this decision immediately after it was delivered?
Well, he was scathing against the Supreme Court. He said that it had been influenced by quote unquote sleazebags that were further influenced by quote unquote foreign powers. He kind of alluded to them being China adjacent. I mean, he said a lot of things, but mostly what really struck me, actually, he said that the justices that ruled against him were an embarrassment to their families. He was not happy with them at all. But the president and his administration were ready for this ruling. And in that news conference, he very quickly pivoted to what he plans to do next.
Well, let's talk about that because, listening to that press conference, he started throwing out a lot of different acts and with a lot of different numbers that are, the blah, blah, blah of 1974, all of this. What is he now talking about doing when it comes to tariffs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be able to really tell you how he plans to do it because he was indeed very unclear. He did cite a number of powers and articles that he feels enable him to maintain his tariff policies, but apply them through different means. But what I can say is that was a very defiant president who was clear that he intends to continue making tariffs the centerpiece of his global engagement when it comes to trade. One of the things he said that was kind of clear-ish was that he plans to introduce a 10% global tariff rate. He actually said that this was great for global stability because now everyone knows that everyone's getting 10%, although we don't know if Canada and Mexico will get that. We'll, I'm sure, get to the specifics for Canada later. But he turned to Jamieson Greer, the U.S. trade representative. He will be leading negotiations for this CUSMA review. And Jamieson Greer is a pretty serious guy. And he was like, yes, sir, we're very confident that our new ways of doing tariffs will work and they are bulletproof when it comes to legal challenges, which kind of raised the question for me then, why did you go for the other method that wasn't bulletproof? But like, who am I to question Jamieson Greer?
Indeed, if they chose to use this Emergency Powers Act to go for tariffs the first time around, why wouldn't they pick the better ones if they had them? If we get back to Canada, because we have a lot of different tariffs, just to be clear, this ruling from the Supreme Court, it will not affect the tariffs on steel, aluminum, forestry, cars. Can you just explain why not?
Yes, very valid confusion. Obviously, there's been tariffs upon tariffs and then reversals and then exemptions. About 90% of trade between Canada and the United States is tariff free because it is protected by CUSMA, which, despite President Trump constantly complaining about it, is in fact still in place. And so that's one thing to remember. The tariffs that are really hurting pockets of the Canadian economy, important pockets where a lot of people are employed in and are great revenue generators, such as steel, aluminum, and so on, lumber, those are affected by what the United States administration is calling sectoral tariffs. So they're not tariffs on Canada specifically, they're tariffs on entire sectors globally. And Canada, unfortunately, is affected by them. They remain in place. So there is no relief for them. We are now wondering whether this new global 10% tariff will impact Canada and Mexico, or whether those two countries will be exempt from that new policy that President Trump announced because of CUSMA. And another question is whether he'll come up with more innovative ways of slapping tariffs on countries that would then hurt Canada. And just for those listeners who were not glued to President Trump's press conference, like I was, desperately hoping to salvage my weekend and hoping that he would not mention the word Canada. Alas, he did. He joked that Canadian officials had told Jamieson Greer that they hoped he won his case against the Supreme Court because losing would make him more creative in applying new tariffs that could worsen Canada's standing. We don't know whether that is true or not, but it kind of gives you an insight into the fact that, Canada and Mexico, despite the drama, actually have a pretty decent deal comparatively to everyone else right now. Of course, that's not the case for the people who are really hurting from the sectoral tariffs, and I don't mean to be dismissive of that. But this new scenario post-Supreme Court has emboldened the president to seek new, more creative ways to bring tariffs in, and has made him angry, and that is never a good thing.
No, it's certainly not. But when we think about our free trade deal, the negotiations for CUSMA, one sort of read before we got the Supreme Court ruling was that perhaps if Trump was if one of the levers was taken away from him that he was able to enact tariffs with, that maybe this would give Canada some leverage or in our trade deal. I mean, do you have any sense of whether that might be the case?
I think it's a lot of three-dimensional chess being played here. And I think that any situation that creates dynamism and new things to be brought into the conversation is not great right now. CUSMA is a very established, solid agreement, and we know the president is no longer wedded to CUSMA as a format. Bad news for Canada. And now this new tariff dynamism could enable the president and his administration to single out more sectors of the Canadian economy that they're angry with. Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, told the New York Times that they continue to be upset about supply management in the dairy industry, digital streaming tax. So it does enable them to actually be like, actually, we don't like this thing that Canada's doing. We'll tariff that thing and not the other thing. So I'm not entirely sure this is good news, actually, for the CUSMA renegotiation.
Yeah, it's incredibly noisy right now.
Yes, I agree. It's all noisy. I mean, maybe it's because the administration doesn't know what it wants to do. I think what they do know is that they want to continue using or threatening to use tariffs as a means of pressuring allies and trading partners to do what they want them to do. And I also think that they are really liking the billions of dollars they're getting in revenue out of those tariffs. They need that money to fund tax cuts and other policies that they're promoting. And so if there is less of that coming in because of a tariff rollback, then where's it coming in from? And so I do think that the administration is wedded to tariffs. I think it's going to be really hard to remove them. In fact, we've been talking about a potential future Democratic administration would have a hard time removing tariffs. It's so nice to be getting those billions in the coffers, and they get priced in. And so I think we're kind of stuck in this pattern. But what exactly it looks like, I think, is really up for negotiation and debate. And the president said that. He's like, I'm doing deals, or doing deals. There's going to be deals. How much you can trust that these deals are robust and stable and lasting is a separate question. And I know that the Canadian government is very concerned that a new deal will not have the same lasting impact as the last one.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like you're suggesting this is a huge win for Canada, but if you wanted to be optimistic, could you consider this a win for Canada?
I think we're in a territory where everything that's not a clear loss for Canada can be interpreted as a win. The bar is low.
We'll take it. Martina, thank you. We'll look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. I will be available to you with a dose of very cautious optimism.
Martina Stevis-Gridneff is the Canadian bureau chief for the New York Times. That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Leah Hendry, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. Oh, and if you're listening, you have a minute to throw us a rating, a review, 5 stars, all that good stuff, please. We'd appreciate it. I'm Paul Havershrude. Thanks for listening.